This toy is most likely to be found in your neighborhood gift shop. It's commonly known as Dippy Bird. You might have come across the toy and would have seen the bird repeatedly sipping water from a container. What impels the bird to do so is a question that puzzles many people. Often mistaken for a perpetual motion machine, the Dippy Bird is actually a heat engine. We will use this toy heat engine as a practical example for understanding a few scientific phenomena. Let us begin by understanding the components of the toy. A glass of water is placed directly in front of the bird. The bird's body comprises of a glass tube that connects two hollow glass bulbs. The bottom bulb forms the bird's bottom and the top bulb forms the bird's head. The head and the beak are covered with a felt cloth for good absorption of water. A red-colored volatile liquid, that is dichloromethane, partly fills the tube as well as the bird's bottom. The empty space inside the body is not occupied by air. Instead, it is occupied by vapor evaporated from dichloromethane liquid. And the body is hinged between the bird's legs. All these components together contribute to the working of the toy. Let us see how. Let us begin from a point in the cycle where the bird is oscillating gently. Here its head is wet because it has already dipped its beak into the water. As the liquid in the tube rises, the top part of the body becomes heavy, which makes it swing forward. The beak gets dipped in the water, while the end of the tube in the bird's bottom rises above the liquid level. This gives way for vapor bubble to travel through the tube into the head, draining the liquid out of the tube. Thus, the bird becomes upright and starts oscillating again. But what still remains unexplained is why the liquid in the tube rises. When the beak comes in contact with the water gets absorbed by the felt cloth. The water rises to the head due to capillary action. As the water evaporates, it slowly cools the bird's head. This process is known as evaporative cooling. Let us briefly understand evaporative cooling. Evaporation is a surface phenomenon. It occurs when a few molecules at the surface gain extra energy from their neighboring molecules. This makes them escape into the space above the liquid. Thus, the high energy molecules escape, leaving behind the low energy ones. This decrease in energy is accompanied by a decrease in temperature of the liquid. In a similar way, the temperature of the bird's head decreases due to evaporative cooling. The decrease in temperature causes a decrease in the pressure exerted by dichloromethane vapor. This leads to a lower pressure level in the head as compared to the bottom. The higher pressure in the bottom slowly pushes the liquid towards the head, thereby causing the liquid to rise through the tube. Thus, the difference in temperatures between the bird's head and the bottom enables the bird to produce mechanical work used for its motion. This is why the bird is considered a heat engine. As you saw, the Dippy Bird is a good toy for learning science, but it teaches us something beyond science as well. It is an excellent example of how keeping a cool head can keep us happily engaged in our work.
Newtonian or non-Newtonian? Wait a minute, is that a question? Well, in science it is. And so this little talk is going to be about how viscosity, pressure, and liquids are strangely connected.
Basically, we've got DNA, so the genetic material of the cell is going to be found inside the nucleus. And that's going to determine, what kind of a cell it's going to become, but it also is going to control the cell. In other words, we're going to make proteins, we're going to make enzymes at a certain time.
Talk about it when it's done. I got my trusty little torch here, and we're just going to light a piece of magnesium, and it's going to react with the oxygen in the air.
The deal is, whenever you have a changing field within a coil, that causes current to flow. Let's write that out. Now let's say you've got a magnetic field.
About the layers of the Earth and the composition of the interior of the Earth and how the temperature and pressure increase as you go from the rocky outer skin, the crust of the Earth, into the inner core. And then the changes that happen on the surface of the Earth as a result of those lithospheric plates moving and shifting about above the asthenosphere.
And that's the same pattern that we see inside of the sun. We also see it in thunderstorms that go up and down because you have a heat source at the bottom, this hot plate, and as the little beams go up and down, they follow a pattern, a circular pattern if you watch them.
Is actually this part, okay, this gray area. This is an inner membrane, and it goes all the way through, and it compartmentalizes the mitochondria. The inside part of this membrane, okay, all this light area, let me do this in blue, this is called the matrix.
How do we go from do to re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do? How do we get all those other notes, okay? And the way you do that, using the just diatonic scale, is you're going to multiply by these magic numbers.
So imagine a ball the size of a football stadium, and right smack dab in the center of the atom, you would find the nucleus. And you could see it. And it would be the size of a small marble.
When we use a website like Amazon.com or when we use a website like Facebook.com, clearly when you load a page and you click on another link, it still remembers you. It still knows who you are. And so the way that people have overcome this statelessness of HTTP, because this does in fact exist, is to use this concept of cookies that we had mentioned briefly a couple of weeks ago, but we're going to talk a little bit more about today. And so a cookie is basically just a small piece of information that a server will send to our computer in the HTTP headers, and more specifically in the response headers from an HTTP server, and will tell our computer to save this little piece of information for some future point. And the next time that my computer goes to that same website, it will then send this cookie information over. So I could then get a cookie, for example, from a remote server that looks something like this. Maybe it's going to be username and then a colon or a semicolon, and then maybe some long string of random words and letters, or just letters and numbers that look something like this: 7C6432, something that looks like this. So this is just one of many types of cookies that we can get. Basically, a cookie, it really can be anything that can be represented in text. Anything that can be represented in text, a server can actually tell our computer to write and store in memory, and then that same information will be sent back to the server. So this goes back to this question that we had earlier on when we were saying, well, is there a chance that when I type in a password to a website and it sends that password, is there the possibility that this password could actually be saved in some unencrypted form on my computer? And the answer, we said, was relatively complicated, but it is possible, and it is in fact possible with cookies. There's nothing stopping a server from sending a cookie that it doesn't look like this with some random collection of numbers and letters and my username, but is in fact my username, and then after like a semicolon, the password that I had actually used. Meaning that this password that I use, that is now vital to log into this to this website, is now stored unencrypted on my hard drive. And many of us, I certainly know that I don't go through all of the cookies on my computer. We may not even know that this password is then saved. Now this is obviously a very bad thing. And if there are websites that are doing this, they're doing security wrong. Most of the time, especially the bigger, more secure websites that have been around for a while, like Amazon and Facebook, they know not to do this. But some of the smaller sites, they may be less experienced. They may not know not to do this, and so this is, in fact, a possibility. So like we said before, don't use the same password for all of the websites, because it's possible that that password is actually stored unencrypted on your computer without you even knowing. Now, coming back to this point, though, we have a cookie, and the cookie, again, is just some information that is written on our computer that a server has requested. So a server has said, I want you to remember this information until the next time you visit this website. And that's all your computer is doing, is it's just blindly saving this information somewhere on its hard drive, and the next time you visit that same website, it then sends this cookie information to the server again. And so in this way, it can then be able to say, okay, well, looking at this random number with this username, I can then remember, oh yeah, I sent that username, this random number, therefore this person is still logged in, and that's basically, in essence, how this actually works. How your session is preserved. How when you go to Amazon.com or Facebook.com and you click on one web page and you go from one page to the next, even though HTTP is stateless, how these web servers still know who you are, is using a cookie in this manner. Now, of course, they could use something like this, but again, this is bad, and generally, we're not going to see this very much, but the possibility does exist, so just be wary of that fact. Now, most of the time, though, like I said, that doesn't happen. Now, if, let's say, just as an example, this actually was a real cookie that I had written, and this cookie represents my session ID. It's actually a session identifier that identifies me to a server like Amazon or Facebook, and you go in and you modify your own cookie. You actually change your cookie that would say your own username and your own random number that was assigned to you by the server. You actually change that to represent mine, and you load up the web page. What do you think is going to happen? If you were to, in essence, use my cookie instead of your own cookie, and this cookie is meant to identify me to this web server, to this website, what might happen? Yep? Right, so you're going to hijack that session. So what this means is that if this was a real cookie, if this was actually my username, if this was actually the sequence of random numbers and letters that represented my session with that server, and you start using this same information, what this means is that the server is then going to be able to, the server will just think that it is then me on your computer. There's nothing stopping it, because there's no real way for the server to identify. Again, because this HTTP is a stateless connection. Once the connection has been formed and then the data requested, then that connection is killed, it's quit. So that there's no way for the server to know that the next person, that the next request coming in is you, or if it's somebody else. It has to rely on some information provided on the computer to be able to identify itself as being this same user.